Hello. The Divine Code reading for August 31st, pages 169 and 170. We're in the chapter, Which Actions Make One Liable for Idol Worship. Topic number 28. If one bows down to the statue of an image of an idol, even if he does not verbally accept it as a deity, this action itself is accepting it as a deity, and he is liable for a capital sin. Likewise, if one bows down to the sun, a star, a mountain, or the like, and he states that he is bowing down to it, even though he does not mention that he is bowing down to it as a deity or accepting as a deity, he is liable for a capital sin. So in the case of a regular idol, if he's bowing down before a regular idol, it's understood that that's what he's doing. If he's bowing down to a natural object, it may not be understood that he's bowing down to an understanding it's a deity. Therefore, he doesn't actually have to say it's a deity unto itself in either case. The fact that he's bowing down before something that is obviously an idol. In the case of an idol, it's obviously an idol. There's no question that's what he's doing. In the case of a natural object, if he says he's bowing, that he understands it to be a deity. Not that he accepts it for himself, but he understands it to be a deity, then his bowing down shows that he is accepting it upon himself as a deity. Therefore, the bowing down is both the worship and the acceptance of what he's bowing down as a deity at the same time. Therefore, he's doing both items at the same time. See Ritva on Tractate Shabbos 72b, that one who bows down to an idol, even not accepting it as a deity, is liable for a capital sin. It appears that he reasons that the bowing itself is accepting the idol's divinity. And if a person said, "You are my God," the majority opinions hold that no matter what the intention is while he's bowing down, one is still liable for the capital sin. See topics 3.9 and 333, that one is liable to punishment in an earthly court for idol worship only if the intention is clear. And that's in this that's in the current chapter that we're reading. That one is liable to capital punishment in an earthly court for idol worship only if the intention is clear. One who prostrates himself before an idol is obviously worshiping it. But prostrating before a person might be for other reasons. That's the next topic here. Topic number 29. It is forbidden to bow down to another person who makes himself into a god. It is, however, permitted to bow down to a fellow person as an act of merely extending greetings, if that is the accepted custom. And we can see an example of that in Exodus 18:7. But in some cultures, the bowing and greeting is intended as a worship of the spirit within the other person, and it is forbidden to bow with this intention. And a lot of the aspects of idol worship is dependent upon the culture that the person is in. If such and such an object is considered an idol within one culture, then to operate within that culture might be or would be considered idolatry. But if if the person's in a different culture where that object is not considered an idol, then it would be different for that in that situation. So here too, for a person, there are some cultures that see a divinity within the other person, and the bowing down before that person is bowing down to that divinity. And it gets a little tricky as to, when we have people themselves being worshipped, which is what's being talked about in this topic, because people do have an amount of self independence. We don't actually have independence, but we have the perception of independence, that if we attributed the tree or some other object as having that level of independence, it'd be absurd. Independence from God, from the Creator. Humans have a measure of independence that allows us free will, and therefore it becomes a little bit trickier as to whether we define a person as a deity, because they already have certain aspects that we would not attribute to anything else in creation, aspects of self-rule. But if we are saying that the person has deity over others, that it becomes an issue, and it's really tricky about bowing in such a case. We should bow as a matter of honor of another person, but we do not bow in a religious aspect towards the other person. Therefore, it is forbidden to bow down to another person who makes himself into a god, just as for any other idol. If one bows down to a person out of fear or honor alone, and does not accept him as a deity, he is exempt from punishment. Rambam, The Laws of the Worship of Stars and Idols, 3:6 writes, or one of your four services, which implies that one who bows down out of love or fear is also exempt from punishment. How is it that one would bow down only from love or fear? What kind of love or fear is being expressed by bowing? We can explain this based on Rambam's statement above, that this refers to one who bows down to a person out of fear of him or to give him honor, even if the person makes himself into an idol. Since the one bowing down is not accepting the other person as a deity, he is exempt from punishment. In the book of Esther, people are told to bow. Mordecai does not bow. Now, it could be argued that they're bowing down in an honorable manner. They're not showing worship towards the other person. Mordecai decided that there was a worship aspect involved in the overall scenario, and therefore he refused to bow. It becomes difficult in the case where if somebody considers himself an idol and other people treat him as an idol, and someone bows before him, they could be said they're bowing before him out of love of the person because he's such a great guy, and that's why people idolize him, or out of fear of the person because the guy's such a horrifying person and people idolize him for that reason. But they're only doing it not accepting him as a deity, but they're accepting him as honor or fear. And therefore, it's not always clear in that case. But it becomes necessary to understand the person's intentions, and often that's just within the person, unless he verbally states it. It's within the person. Therefore, it'd be difficult to prosecute in such a case, but we need to know for our own selves how we're handling our lives. And it's important for the halakha to exist, even if it's difficult to enforce. It still has to exist. Likewise, one who bows down to an idol out of fear alone and does not accept it as a deity is exempt. See Tractate Sanhedrin 61b and Tosafot on Tractates Avodah Zarah 3a. What type of fear are we discussing? By which one is not liable if he bows down to an idol because of it. By analogy, if a person is afraid of a king, since the king might kill him or be angry at him if he displeases the king, he will hasten to bow down in order to appease the king. So in many cultures, the king was seen as a deity. The king was seen as the overall protector of the nation, and the divine providence would flow through the king, was the understanding. Or the nation benefited through the providence provided by the king. And if people were bowing down to the king, understanding it in that manner, that the king is the sovereign, that their subsistence, that the citizen's subsistence comes through the king, and they're bowing down for that purpose, then that would be considered idol worship. But they're bowing down because they're afraid the king. They don't bow down, the king's going to arrest them. They're bowing down for that reason, then it would not be considered idol worship. Another example. If one finds himself in a crowd and they bow down to an idol, he will feel uncomfortable to act differently from all the rest, or he may fear that they might cause him harm if he does not copy their actions. It is still forbidden to bow down before the idol, unless it is obviously a situation of life or death. And thus did Elijah the prophet rule for the righteous Gentile Naaman, who was commander of the army of the idolatrous king of Aram. 2 Kings 5:15-19. After he recognized the truth of the God of Israel, he proclaimed before Elijah, "Your servant will never again offer a burnt offering or sacrifice to other gods, but only the Lord. But may God forgive your servant for this thing. When my master, the king, comes to the temple of his idol and bow down there, he leans on my arm, so I must bow in the temple. May God forgive your servant for this thing." Tractate Sanhedrin 74a explains that Naaman had asked permission to bow to the temple's idol out of fear of the king, and asked if he must sacrifice his life not to bow. Elijah said, "Go in peace," which is explained in Sanhedrin as permission, because a Gentile need not sacrifice his life in order to avoid bowing down before an idol or in an idol's temple. So Naaman, it was a general, and he would be with the king. It'd be in a situation where people are worshiping, the king is worshiping, and the king expected him to worship. It would have been a risky thing for him to disobey the king at this point. Therefore, he had permission to save himself by not bowing down. I mean, by bowing down, by not refusing to bow down. But if one did so without accepting the idol, and he is only doing so out of fear from the crowd, his act is not a capital sin, and he is not liable for this. So it can either be that he fears the He fears the king. He fears the person making himself into an idol, or he fears being uncomfortable by not going along with the crowd, or he fears the crowd might go against him. Those are the three things being explained here as reasons for him to go along with what everyone else is doing. Likewise, a person is exempt from punishment if he does not accept the idol as a deity, but he bows down for this reason to an idol, or he thinks that it is fitting to honor it in some reason, or because he is afraid in his foolish mind the idol itself, and thinks that if he does not bow down to it, it can do evil to him. So in a similar way, if just as for the human that makes himself an idol, such as a king who makes himself claims to be a deity, Caesar, one of the other kings that do this. If he fears the idol can do something to him, or if he thinks he should give it the idol honor because it's proper for whatever reason, he's doing it for the purpose of honor, not for the purpose of accepting as a deity, or or he's just afraid of the crowds. Whether it's a miscellaneous idol or if it's a human idol, the same principles apply. That these would be exemptions for the person in the case of bowing. And what we saw earlier, it would be for all four areas of idol worship. Any form of idol worship, if it's done for these reasons, is an exemption. Although it would be better for the person to refuse, but it's not required that the person refuse. Thank you.